Hey there, listeners. We're coming at you from back in the family cabin in Riggins, Idaho. We're back here with nieces and nephews running all around me, but I'm not going to let you all go without a podcast this week. So, welcome to episode 117 of the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Matt Christian, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty, and I'll be your host yet again for this episode. So, working in the outdoors is a prospect that's appealing to many of us, especially those that probably are listening to this podcast. Now, today, we're talking to a professional whose vocation involves living and breathing and working in the outdoors. We're talking about park rangers today. Now, Shawn Llewellyn is a park ranger at Paris Mountain State Park in South Carolina. And to be a park ranger, there's a lot of concessions that you have to make. But for those of you that love the land, those concessions are well worth it. This is a really cool conversation with Shawn. We talk about his lifestyle as being a park ranger, what it takes to be a park ranger, and what that entails. And for people that are looking to find a situation where they are working outdoors and working in the wilderness on a consistent basis, and maybe they're not out buying or leasing land, this is actually a really cool opportunity for those of you that have explored that idea. So sit back, enjoy, and since it's this week, it's the holidays, I want to wish everybody a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey, and for those of you that are following the sports, let's go Lions. Now you know where I root. All right, everybody, thank you, and enjoy the episode. All right, so I am sitting here with Shawn Llewellyn, and Shawn is a park ranger at Paris Mountain State Park in Greenville, South Carolina. And the normal course of conversation, this is one that deviates from the typical course of conversations that we have on this, is that we talk to a lot of private landowners about their land use. We talk about hunting land. We talk about, ranches and farms and stuff like that. And this is more parkland, and it's still land. It's still use of land. And Shawn helps manage that land. And so it's just Shawn is actually married to one of our team members here at National Land Realty, and with his wife Melinda, and they reside in the park right now, and which is I want to get into that. I very much want to get into that because I'm jealous of it. But this is just a different use of land, and Shawn has an absolute ton of experience with it, and so wanted to get in and have this conversation, the life of a park ranger and what all you do, and with the amount of people that come through national parks, I do want to get the inside scoop on some of the what do you want to call it, the escapades, I guess would be the one. But anyway, Shawn, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into this in the first place, and sort of what's your role in the park?
Yeah, so I'm a park ranger. I kind of deal with the day-to-day operations of the park. A lot of maintenance stuff. It's everything, basically. And how I got into it is I started back in 2005. They were hiring for a trail crew because the park just acquired a bunch of land. And it was through a recreational trails grant. And that's kind of how I started with the whole Park Service thing, is I was building mountain biking and hiking trails for the state of South Carolina. And I was hired under that grant. The only downside to that grant, it was a temporary grant. So each year you had to compete for the grant. You'd fill out a grant application, and hopefully you would get it each year. So I did that for 2 years until we didn't get the grant. And then I actually left here for about 2 years and worked at Jones Gap, Caesar's Head, the Mountain Bridge Wilderness area, which is just north of here, about 45 minutes. It's the start of the Blue Ridge Escarpment. So where we live is considered the Piedmont. And then, once you get up towards the mountains of South Carolina and North Carolina, everything's real dramatic and pretty up there. It's just the mountains are just popping out of the ground.
So you said when you started this, you initially started to go in the trail crew, and for those, I like to assume people know things, but I'm just going to go at it from the perspective of people that don't. This is just cutting trails. Like what made you decide, like, I want to go cut trails in the woods?
I just always enjoyed the outdoors. I'd always go camping as a kid. Got into rock climbing and cycling and mountain bike, all the different facets of the outdoors. And funny enough, Melinda found the job because I had just moved back to South Carolina with her, and she luckily found that I was working at a restaurant at the time, and she found the job. I put in for it, and the cool thing about the interview was you had to work with the guys for a full day, and there was no guarantee to get the job. But that's how they kind of. It was a really good way to filter out someone, because if they could like physically keep up with those guys all day, they're probably good to go. So I passed the test, and that's how I ended up on the trail crew, because the park acquired a bunch of land from Greenville Water. I think it was about 365 acres, and we added quite a bit of trail in that 2-year span that I worked for under the grant. So.
Having spent my college years in food service, I could completely understand your answer now. After working in food service, nothing would ever make me want to just go hack away in the woods by myself in the wilderness than getting how my steak is cooked all day. Like that would do it for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's definitely as I get older, it's definitely a young man's job to go out and do that. But it was probably the toughest job I ever had, because of the amount of effort you're just putting into like get gear out wherever you're working, or machinery, or if something broke down. It was you didn't need a gym membership when you were working on the trail crew. I mean, you're out burning calories all day.
So you started doing trail crew, and then you transferred out, still staying in the park service, and then just have worked your way into the park ranger position just throughout the years then.
Yeah. So one of the nice things about South Carolina State Parks is they typically will hire within the agency, even though we weren't technically full-time state employees on the trail crew. You got to meet people and work with different park managers, and basically it's a good way to get your name out there.
Oh yeah.
And I ended up getting a job at Mountain Bridge Wilderness Area, and Jones Gap's probably one of my favorite state parks that's local. I worked over there as like an assistant ranger for a little while, and then I got a full-time maintenance job for a very brief period of time. And then the ranger position opened up here at Paris Mountain, and I did that for about 2 years. And then I came back after that, and I haven't left.
So tell me about, I mean, I just curious about, and we talked beforehand, right? Like, because, I want to dive into it just a second before we go on to sort of what it's like the day in the life of. But as far as the procurement of land for national parks, you mentioned a little bit about the process from your perspective. And I was just curious if you could just enlighten on what the process kind of is, just even though it's not involved in your side, right? Ranger side isn't involved in that, but there's committees and they go into procurement, and then if people donate land, right?
Yeah. So I don't know that I've experienced too many easements here at Paris Mountain State Park as far as that goes. But we've acquired land from Greenville Water, which used to own most of the land around the park. And then there's different nonprofit conservation organizations in Greenville. And they'll actually raise money to protect certain areas of land that are around the park. And Paris Mountain's kind of an oddball because the way it's surrounded by so many different landowners, you wouldn't think there's any room to grow, and we're getting another 65 acres. Prior to that, I think we acquired 120 acres. And then, there's been, I think, 4 or 5 land acquisitions by the park in the past, however long I've worked, 20 years that I've worked here. So it's kind of weird, like where are you getting this property from? But the land conservation organizations do a really good job of finding that land and then acquiring it. And as far as the inner workings of all that between them and the folks in Columbia, I'm not part of that as much, but it's definitely appreciated.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interaction of, and this is just for landowners out there. If you are if you large landowners or those on the borders of state parks, there's a lot of donation or purchase, or in Idaho they have a land swap where they'll donate uh pieces of land for a like and kind land in a certain area. Like there's different ways of managing that and making that part of your legacy. It's kind of an interesting thing. So I want to kind of go back in, like what is a day in the life of a park ranger? Like tell us a little bit about sort of the duties, because I imagine it's not a routine.
No, it's the most diverse job I've ever had. And I think a lot of people may have like an idea in their head of what they think a park ranger does. I would just say it's completely different than what people may think. I think a lot of people think we're out like, hiking trails and looking at the leaves and just, kind of enjoying life, which there is some of that, of course. But so like I'm usually on duty from Monday to Monday, and basically that's 8 days in a row. You're just working nonstop, and but the nice side of that is you get almost like a week off. So it's like a week on, week off, and our duties kind of include, doing revenue for the park, managing the staff. I'll clean a toilet, a bathroom. I mean, I'm not that's totally fine. And a lot of renovation work. I recently renovated our entire house. So as far as the diversity goes, it's you have to be like a jack of all trades in a sense. And you kind of, as you get older and older, you start to learn different facets of the job. And yeah, it's extremely diverse.
So in as far as managing teams, how much are you interacting with people who are in the like? Are you front facing with people in the park, or are you managing the teams that are more front facing?
So I'm right in the middle of everything. Yeah, I deal with people day to day. Today's a rainy day, so there's a lot more computer work that we're doing today. But yeah, on the weekends it'll just be wide open, and I'll sometimes help at the fee booth, helping campers out. Just there's all sorts of different situations where you're helping. I was just helping someone jump a battery or something like that, changing tires. You have some issues with some users as well. So you'll have like mountain bikers and hikers, and sometimes they have some disagreements that you have to go out and deal with. But yeah, there's I'd say the weekends are like the biggest time where I'm constantly interacting with park users.
So and I haven't been to Paris Mountain State Park, so I was just curious, is it a sightseeing primarily? Is it a camping primarily? What's the type of setup that you are in particular?
So we're kind of classified as a traditional park. There's wilderness areas. There's different styles of park. So you have your historical sites and stuff like that. We're considered traditional in that we have camping, picnic areas, trailside camping, fishing, hiking, mountain biking trails. We're kind of like that traditional, recreational park. Where Jones Gap and Caesar's Head's more of a wilderness area. I'd say our impact is a little greater here because we have picnic areas and stuff like that, and just people everywhere.
So it's a mixture of day use, overnight use, and recreation is kind of the established sort of things that people are doing.
Yeah, and we do have a big group camp, which is Camp Buckhorn. And that's kind of turned into a wedding venue. It used to be a group camp for underprivileged kids in Greenville a long, long time ago. And basically we did a big renovation. And so we have Camp Buckhorn, which is a really big lodge. And then there's 10 cabins that come with that as well. So there's all sorts of different areas throughout the park that have different uses.
So I got to ask you, I think we talked about it before, and your wife has talked about it in meetings before, but like you guys live inside of the park. What is that like? And sort of tell me how, was that just an option that was presented to you, or is that just an option for when you were the ranger of a certain area? Like, how does that whole thing work?
Yeah, so most of your ranger jobs in South Carolina and probably most other parks, even national parks, most of your park ranger positions are going to require that you actually live on the park. And my job's one of them. We actually have three rangers that live here on the park at all, 24 hours a day. And yeah, so with that job, it wasn't an option. You actually have to
Okay.
live at the park. But there are other jobs like maintenance jobs, or we also have a park interpreter that does school programs, and she lives outside the park. She doesn't need to be here because we're kind of on call 24 hours a day through that 8-day window that we work.
How important is it that you get along with your coworkers then, since you're like living around each other and working together?
Yeah, extremely. Because I mean, they're your neighbors as well, and like yeah, and, you're driving by their house all the time on their day off, all sorts of stuff. So one of the things we always try to be considerate about is like if you're driving by, just wave or something. Don't stop down the driveway and start talking about things that happened at work or something that pissed you off or whatever. So we yeah, it works well though with the staff we have. We all get along really well.
I was gonna say you have to like be friends, but you also have to give space because you need to let people get away from work.
Yeah, I mean, you're around the person at work, and then when you go home, they're still there. So it's not like they live, right next to me, but everyone's there all the time. So that's a difference that when I was talking about how people in their head have a idea of a park ranger job, that's one of those things that might throw them off if they were to just step into a park ranger job and start working.
And that's something to keep in mind when people encounter park rangers, because it's like the park ranger's kind of the authority of the park. And one, I'm sure people screw with you all the time as far as like trying to buck the system and stuff. But it's like you're
Yeah,
talking about somebody who lives on that area. This is their home. This is the thing that they do. They've in situations where somebody's moved in from out of town, like you've uprooted your whole family to go and do this and like live this lifestyle. And like this is a part of your life. So it's like it's not just like you go and it's your day job and you're there to like pester campers. Like like I feel like that perspective is always needed, like that the putting yourself in somebody else's shoes thing. Um,
yeah, and that brings up a really good point because it's almost like I kind of go into autopilot when I'm off because Melinda and I'll be driving through the park and she's trying to point something out that isn't right or someone's doing, and you've got to just you just kind of say, don't, well, I'm not going to worry about that. Let's just keep going. So
I'm off
you
today.
can't get
Not
too
checking my
possessive.
phone. So, what is it like? What is the interactions like? Like, are people generally great? Are people generally a pain in the butt? And or not pain in the butt's the wrong word because I don't want to put you in an adversarial position answering that question.
Yeah.
I mean, like, do you get hassled a lot?
No, I wouldn't. I'd say I always tell everyone 99% of the people are easygoing, easy to deal with. They're fun to talk to. Every once in a while, like anywhere, you meet someone you just cannot please. And I mean, I feel like that's at any job for the most part, especially if you're working with the public. So, all in all, I never get too frustrated about it. Like if someone, says the wrong thing to me, I've gotten good at just going home and it leaves my head right away. But all in all, everything is, there's a lot of like-minded people out here. So you have a lot of common interests and you get to talk to different people. So overall, I'd say everyone's pretty good.
So I have to throw a curveball at you because I read about this during COVID when everybody was flocking to national parks, and it was the one thing I read was the biggest problem that they found was people that would refuse to use the outhouses and kept on like finding trees and stuff. Was that a thing?
Yeah, I believe so. But at our park, the access to the park is a little bit different. So we just have one way in, one way out, and we actually had to manage that gate. I had myself, a DNR guy, a highway patrol, and sometimes a Greenville County sheriff. So we closed for, I think it was about a month, to get things ready to set up, so you didn't have that close contact with people. And that went off pretty flawlessly because you had all those guys just posted up at the front and explaining to people it's closed. So on our end, it really wasn't too bad trying to manage anyone trying to trespass. There was a few people that would come in and wander in, and you just had to tell them we were closed. Yeah, I saw some crazy stories and saw some stuff on the internet at like national parks, for instance, where you're getting like millions of people visiting every year that had some real issues.
Out west, they called it like the poop crisis. It was like they couldn't handle the amount of people that were pooping in the woods at the park. And you think about it, right? Like you get a park with millions of people that are come in and like crap behind a tree and won't use the outhouse, and it's like it's a problem you would never think about unless it started happening like that. It was like that's not fun to deal with. Like
yeah, we literally just closed for 3 weeks because of Hurricane Helene. We had thousands of trees down in the park, and all in all, it really wasn't too hard to manage, trying to keep people out while you're dropping trees. I think if people hear multiple chainsaws going, they'll kind of turn around and leave. But
yeah, because I mean, you're not just cutting out the stuff that's down or a block. You have to cut the stuff like the dead man trees where like they're leaned up and could not even pose a risk right now, but in the future pose a risk and stuff too. Is that does that fall on you or does it fall on you to direct it?
So the park staff, we go through a training. You got to get chainsaw certified and all that kind of stuff. So basically it falls on the staff for the most part. This last storm, the circumstances were a little different. So we had park rangers from across the state. They were actually bringing supplies, gas, chainsaws, all sorts of stuff, heavy equipment. And so that was kind of nice. It would have been overwhelming for our small staff to have to tackle all the trees that were out here. But in large part, we did most of the cutting, but it was nice having that resource, those other team members just bringing, we had people bringing stuff from like Myrtle Beach State Park, which is completely across, it's like 4 hours away, just to bring us gas because we were kind of running out of gas at gas. It was long lines at the gas stations and stuff like that. So, but yeah, we do all the cutting ourselves. Dan and I are on the tree care climbing team. So we'll actually go up and like climbing arborist and go climb and cut stuff and things like that. So
what are the most common problems that you have to deal with as a park ranger? Like are there certain things that just people in general do that it's always a thing that you have to deal with? Or like, I just don't know, like people seem to be behavioral. So I can imagine that there's certain things that you're like, yep, that's going to happen every week. Like, I didn't know if there was, if there's anything as far as generalities.
Yeah. I would say it's almost too diverse here. There's a lot of like common things like people being late or something like that. And you're trying to go home and get the park locked up. But I would say there wouldn't be a way to put a finger on one thing because some things will just blow your mind when you get a phone call on the emergency line and you're like, I have never heard of that or thought to think of that before. But for instance, I got a call down at the office and my manager was down there as well. And I think it was it was the fire department, the local fire department called us and said they had a kid stuck in one of the chimneys. And basically there was an old foundation of a house near where the old fire tower used to be on top of the mountain. So I just thought for sure it was a prank call. And I asked my manager, I was like, you want to go up there and check it? He's like, yeah, we got to. And we get up there and there's like 3 teenage boys and myself. And I look up and sure enough, there's a set of feet at the smoke shelf. And his friends bet him he couldn't be like Santa Claus or something like that and go down the chimney and pop out the other side. And looking up, you could clearly tell no one's going to fit through that small area. So it took us, I think, like 3 hours to get the kid out of the flue of the chimney. So you wouldn't think of that, you know?
But as soon as you said stuck in chimney, the thought immediately goes to teenage boy. Like, you know who it's going to be. You just don't know where they're going to be.
Yeah, they were like 16 years old or something like that. But yeah, that's where that, you know, putting a finger on something there. We've had all sorts of different issues that we've had to deal with throughout the years that you're just like, how did this happen?
Oh yeah. Well, so you were talking about closing the park down at night. So is it overnight camping or is it?
Yeah. So it's a big day use park for like mountain bikers, hikers, people that just want to use our playground or play on our ball field, or picnic. But we do have a campground that has about 40 sites.
Okay.
So basically they get checked in and they get a gate combination. So after the gate's locked, they can still gain access to the park or leave the park. But they do have to lock the gate back. So that would be one problem that campers will kind of leave the gate wide open. But we have so many people kind of going in and out that someone usually shuts it back for us. So.
Because I feel like that, well, just in terms of problems, I feel like that brings a whole different set of, like, you got the day use problems, like I wrecked my mountain bike, I got stuck in a chimney, you know, that kind of stuff. And then there's the overnight stuff that is a whole different set of problems of, like, we forgot our food or don't know how to set up a tent or something falls down or it's kind of like a nonstop thing. Like you mentioned, you're on call 24 hours a day. Is that something like you encounter, like late night kind of stuff too?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we get calls in the emergency line. And someone may not know how to flip a circuit breaker or something like that, but it may be something as simple as that, which isn't the best thing to do at, 11:30 at night. And then there's other issues where, someone cut themselves or just, there's a whole list of things, but yeah, you'll get called out at, sometimes 2 a.m, for just crazy things, so I won't list too many of them because,
liability, right? There's liability with that.
Yeah. We've had some, some crazy stuff. So.
Animal problems? Do you guys, like, you were talking about 2 a.m. phone calls, and I'm thinking like, oh, skunk.
Yeah.
But I
don't think we've had that issue before. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we've had, like over at Jones Gap, we've had, people bit by like copperheads and stuff like that. Cause they'll, I think it's like in August might be their breeding season. And if that's one thing you want to watch out for is you're walking at night, cause that's the time they kind of come out and start looking for food. And they look just like leaves. So yeah, we had a kid, I think he stepped on it or something like that and got bit. Yeah, we have not a whole lot of animal issues here at the park. Unless you're like leaving your food out or something like that. So
that's one thing. Me as a Westerner, the idea of snakes that don't make noise is just the most terrifying thing for me.
Yeah, it's
like
nice
copperhead,
to hear that rattle. Yeah.
Like
I've come across a couple. Yeah, I've come across a couple rattlesnakes at Jones Gap, and that warning is super nice because I was rock climbing up at Big Rock and I actually touched a copperhead. Luckily I moved my hand away quick enough. I was climbing up this little ledge and I felt something that just didn't feel right. It was one of those things where in your head, you just react to it and move really quick because in your head, you know what it is. But yeah, as soon as I got above the ledge and looked down, it was like a copperhead all coiled up right there. So that was a close call.
No. They need to make noise.
Yeah.
They need bells or something. No,
Yeah.
freaks me out, man. You mentioned something beforehand about sort of with your experience on trails and building trails, and that as far as dimensions, types, and regulations, and I'm absolutely curious about what you could tell me about that.
Yeah. So as far as building trails, like if you were a landowner and had, a fair amount of property, you could go out and build a mountain biking trail. With hiking trails are a little bit different because you get to work with more structures and things like that, like stone steps or log crossings, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of back in the day when they were building parks. Paris Mountain's a CCC park, so it was built back in the 30s, and they used to just like it would be basically a goat path from one point to the other, not thinking about sustainability. It was just you just go up a hill, and that was your trail. And the biggest thing with building trails is how to manage the water that hits the trail from rain. And basically, the idea is to get that water off the trail as quick as possible. So when you're laying out trail, there's certain grades you have to follow. Like you don't want to break 12% grade as you're going up. And they use tools like a clinometer. So basically, say you and I are the same exact height and we're out laying out trail, you would go up to the point to where we want to take the trail potentially. And I would look through that clinometer and point it right at your eyes. And that would tell me inside the scope what the grade would be from me to you. And then, if it breaks that 12% or something like that, you may want to scoot it down. Or if it's a hiking trail, you might be able to do some like rock armoring or something on the tread as far as the layout goes. And then there's reasons why you'd break those rules. If you have like a awesome tree or like a I call them trail features, like a waterfall or just something unique. If you have no choice but to go up that, you need to sometimes break that rules because you need the trail to also be fun. And then as far as like hiking trails and mountain biking trails, it's important to lay out flow for mountain bikers. So you want to have a nice flowy trail that almost kind of has that roller coaster kind of ride to it in a sense.
So you don't want that 90-degree turn that sends them off into the tree.
Yeah. You don't want an abrupt turn and stuff like that. So, but that was one of my favorite things working on the trail crew was learning how to lay out trail. And then after you laid it out, you actually built it and got to go back and ride it like on your mountain bike or something like that. And you were just, the last trail I built was Canoga Trail. And my park manager's like, make it as flowy as possible. He wanted it to feel like a roller coaster ride. And and after we rode it, it was just so much fun to, see it all come together and, build that trail. But if I owned a piece of land, that's probably one of the first things I'd like to do is to have a mountain biking trail or a hiking trail or something like that. And you can do it by hand or with machinery. A lot of guys nowadays are using mini excavators as opposed to a mini bulldozer because you're using the hydraulic power as opposed to engine power where you're just pushing. But yeah, I have all sorts of books on laying out trail, and it's just if you're ever interested in it, I'll send you a book.
Excellent. So as far as lifestyle, what are the ups and downs of it? Like what's your favorite part? What's your least favorite part?
I always it sounds kind of simple, but my favorite part is the commute. So basically, I step out of the house, I'm at work. I always, I don't know if I could go back after doing this for so long to driving to work on the highway and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the big things. And then also, like we were talking about earlier, is you kind of get $1 million view. You're living in a place where not many people get to live. It's, so protected. And you got access to trails, you got lakes, it's all part of your backyard. So that's the biggest thing, I think, is having that 24-hour access to the park. And then least favorite is that you're always at work. So basically, that I have this funny sign that says, "Where do park rangers go to get away from it all?" And we just go to other parks, basically. So Melinda and I like to go up to like Hot Springs, or I usually like to take her out to the middle of nowhere somewhere. So she's a good sport about it.
I was going to say, and we talked a little bit about this kind of before we jumped in, is, there's a lot of people that want that rural experience or an outdoors experience or to live around the outdoors. And I feel like, your thought goes to lease or own land. And then there's this whole field of professions like yourself that has the opportunity to do that. And you didn't even have to go through the trouble of trying to find a purchase to do it. You work around it and stuff. And so like the whole park ranger envelope is an opportunity that's out there. And there's others as well, right? There's so in my neck of the woods, it's fish and game officers. They're out in the woods all the time and doing their thing. It's just wildland police force. There's fire tower watches. There's there's opportunities working, running a campground, volunteer opportunities. I spent a summer in the woods at it was a government owned piece of land, but it was a seasonal thing. It was a whitewater rafting operation for the Boy Scouts of America, and I had been there. So I lived by a river for an entire year in a tent. And so like there's opportunities like that out there for people that want to get out and have that experience as a lifestyle. And it could be seasonal or it could be year round. And it's like, but it's those kind of things are out there. And in your case, there's 3 of you in the park?
Yeah, so there's Emily, myself, and Dan. I kind of live under the microscope because my house is just uphill from the park center. It's kind of like where all the action is. So every time you step out of your house, like people are, "Oh, look, there's a park ranger," And then Dan, who he actually lives on the complete opposite side of the park. He unfortunately has to drive into work. But his location is really nice because he's where we actually leased the house that it's still on Greenville Waters property. And he lives there, but he's got like a 15-minute commute. And then Emily's up towards the front of the park, and she doesn't live very far from us, but
it's still pretty close between all y'all. And do people knock on the doors? Like, does that happen? Like, do people knock on the door and it's like,
and that's when I was saying we're like in the middle of it all. I mean, I've had people just try to walk in because they thought like my house doesn't look like a bathroom, but they thought it was like the bathroom or something like that. And then, you just get people stopping and asking questions. What's that?
Like, you want some breakfast?
Yeah. No, I've had kids from the playground is literally right behind my house, and they walk up looking for water. I'll give them a bottle of water or something. But there's all sorts of reasons they stop at the house. I've even had people that don't know how to operate the combination lock. They'll walk all the way from the front gate and knock on my door at 11 o'clock at night, and they just don't know what to do. But yeah, I would say Melinda and I get the most unexpected visitors in the park.
Did you have to draw straws for like where you lived, or was it just did it just happen in the opening, or is there like a seniority thing? Like, hey, I've worked here longer than you, I get the better house. Like, is it?
No, they're kind of they're already predetermined. So like when I leave this job, whoever's putting in for this specific job is going to get this house. So Emily is the park manager. She's the first house as you go in. And she doesn't even have like the biggest house, but she lives in the first CCC house as you come into the park. And yeah, it just so happens that's her house. So like if you put in for her job one day, you'll get her house. Put in for Dan's, you'll get Dan's house.
I got you. And so working your way up the way that you did, is that the typical way that people get into this? Like what's the typical route, or did you go through a typical route?
Yeah, so I always get that question every time I go to the grocery store or anywhere in my uniform. And the best way to get into the Park Service, at least South Carolina State Parks, is to start at whatever low level job, like a fee booth person or a boat person, or even volunteering, because most of the time, like I said, the agency hires within. So Dan and I each have an assistant ranger, and those jobs we lose them quite frequently because there's other full-time ranger jobs that pop up in the state and they'll open up. And that's typically where our assistant rangers will go. They'll go to like a full-time job like we have and live on a park elsewhere in the state. I haven't really moved much from this position. Melinda works in Greenville, and she's got a good job. And so there's not a lot of reason why we would leave here. And there's a lot of other park rangers that have moved all around. They've moved like 6 times or something like that, trying to promote. And that's how they usually promote within the park, is you bounce from park to park until you work your way kind of out of the park in a sense, because you'll be a regional chief or something like that. And then you have to have your own house and stuff like that. So.
Got you. So it's one of those where, I mean, you could by hiring within, you are rewarding those that have put in their time. And like,
yeah,
this is sort of the reward for busting your hump and working your way up within Park Service, right? Whoops, I think you froze. We have a first. So Shawn's internet connection has frozen.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, he's back. Man, I was just stalling for time. I was like, well, I guess I could end the podcast right now, or I'm going to talk my way. You caught me in the middle of the stall. We got you back.
Yeah. So, that's one of the things I do like about hiring within the agency, because we've trained these guys. We know what they're capable of doing. We know all their strengths and weaknesses and all that kind of stuff. And some of them, they'll put in like 2 years working here as an assistant ranger. And it's good to have some kind of payoff like that, like to be able to move up in the Park Service and move on and stuff like that. So I like the fact that it's the hiring process is kind of done that way, because you kind of like proved yourself. And, we've hired volunteers as well before. So it's nice to hire people who already know the reservation systems, the revenue systems, all the different things that go with being a park ranger and getting them going. So
what is one thing that you would like to say to anybody going to a park before they get there to make your life easier?
I always like just to have some kind of preparation ahead of time, like see what the weather's like. Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be raining? Do I need extra water? A lot of that, just having that, like, know where the trail goes, how far it is, if there's a lot of elevation gain, is there water down there, and is the park open? So just having just some kind of basic information before you go to a park. That way you're not out on a 90-degree day or something like that. You just brought a 16-ounce bottle of water for like an 8-mile hike or something like that. That would be the biggest thing, is just being prepared to go out and exert yourself to a certain point and be prepared for that. Because that's something we deal with quite often in the summer, is you'll get people that, have decided to get in shape today, and it just so happens it's 94 degrees outside, and they'll hike to a pretty remote spot in the park. And that is a big undertaking to get someone that's like 3 miles out on the trail system to get them back to a parking lot, to get them on an ambulance or wherever they need to go. So.
You got to do the soft stretcher, right?
Yeah. We have a Stokes basket, and basically Stokes baskets, those you almost see them on attached to helicopters when they're lifting people up.
It's exactly
but we have like this, it's like a big 4-wheeler tire that sits right underneath the patient. And then there's guys on either side. So you're not like lifting them the whole time. You're more like rolling them. But every 10 feet, you got to lift them over a rock or a root or something like that. So
I've never
still not easy.
That sounds amazing. I was part of a search and rescue thing on accident. I was walking with my family. I think we were 4 miles in, and somebody blew out their leg. And then it's from a small town where I live, so everybody walking by me, all the EMTs were like local guys that I knew. Like, oh, what's up, Bob? And then like you were looking at like, Bob looks really winded. Do you need help, Bob? Yes. So we all packing this person out, and it's the material that you make like a whitewater raft out of. That is like with the stretcher thing, because it was a soft stretcher that they were in.
Okay.
That is an awful undertaking. It
just had like the poles going through the material or something.
It didn't even have. It wasn't even that. There was no poles. It was just soft, and so there's no leverage. So I think we had 8 people, and it burned every one of us out. Like 4 miles like that was awful.
Yeah, and that happens quite a bit. That you mentioned that is, we'll be out trying to get someone out, and sometimes. Some of the calls don't require calling the fire department for help or EMTs. So like a mountain biker will like maybe break his collarbone or something, or break his ankle. And basically you get out there and you're just trying to help the guy get out. Now, a lot of times, most of your trail users that are just out hiking, hey, do you need a hand? I'm like, yeah. And they'll push the bike or help the patient, however we need to get them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happens quite frequently, and I appreciate the people that stop and help. So,
well, excellent. Well, hey, I promised to only tie you up here for like 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm about there. And
okay.
Are you on the clock today? Are you on the clock right now? Are you like doing the thing?
Yeah. So, I work until 6 today, or whenever I get everyone out of here.
Okay.
But basically, today is one of those days where it's raining. So the amount of people that come out here is slim to none. So it is a good day for me to catch up on all my paperwork, emails, all that kind of stuff. So.
Well, that being the case, man, I totally appreciate you giving some time here today to talk it through. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was fun. Thank you, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you, Shawn.
This concludes episode number 117 of the National Land Realty Podcast, discussing lifestyle and careers of our National Park Rangers with Shawn Llewellyn. He's a park ranger at Paris Mountain State Park in South Carolina. Now, you can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com. And like I said at the beginning, enjoy your holidays, enjoy your families, eat too much food, go Lions.